Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Well, good morning, my friends. Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and, of course, across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning. It is the Thursday edition of the Michael Dukes Show, where we focus mainly on Alaska issues day in and day out. We are the diehard crew who dive down deep into the muck that is Alaska politics. That's pretty much what we focus on because that's about all I think that we can have any kind of control over. Quasi-control, potential control. I'm just not even sure at this point. Welcome to the program. It's Thursday. Today is the day that the governor is going to deliver his State of the State address, and he's going to unveil his plans. Although cat's kind of out of the bag yesterday, he held a 90-minute press conference and unveiled some of the components, including acknowledging and confirming that he is going to include some form of tax, potentially a 2 to 4% sales tax, seasonal sales tax across the state of Alaska, although it's got a sunset. I mean, if you believe that. Anyway, we're going to have some discussions on that today. Full boat on the program today, starting off here in hour one with Senator Robb Myers, who is going to give us his take on the start of the session, including that Senate majority press conference that was held on Tuesday. Oh, man, that is the gift that's going to keep on giving, I guarantee you, throughout the rest of this session. That'll be our touchstone. We're going to be going back to that probably over and over and over again. We'll have more of the gems out of that thing next week as we get into this. So we're going to talk with Robb Myers about the session here in just a moment in hour one. Then in hour two, we're going to recap some of this stuff with former Representative Ben Carpenter, who is going to come on board. He's got his new venture, Oversight Live. It's up and running yet. Now, I haven't watched it, but we're going to get some details from him on that. The practicalities of it, how do we do it, where do we go, and then of course his take on everything that's happened since Tuesday when the session kind of got going. This is going to be interesting to watch. Like I said, every year I say this is going to be an interesting session, and every year it seems to get ever more interesting. As we go through. I mean, that old Confucian saying of "May you live in interesting times" is like it's not just a saying; it's like a lifestyle around here. Anyway, we're going to jump into this and get things ready to rock and roll. Let's get started with it this morning. Senator Robb Myers is joining us this morning live from Juneau. With the latest and greatest on that. Let's get started and see what he has to say. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing all right, Michael. How about yourself?
Oh, not too bad. We're just getting ready to go and looking at what we can find out here.
Hey, you got to remember that that whole "May you live in interesting times." It's not a saying; it's a Chinese curse.
Is that what it is? It's a curse. It's a Confucian curse, not a saying, but a curse. Okay. Well, I've been looking at this I was trying to be positive, Rob. Thanks. Now it's a curse, and it's all.
Always happy to help.
Always happy to make it happen. All right, Rob. Well, let's get into this and get started on this. This press conference, as I said yesterday, was interesting because this was the first time that many of these people were kind of acknowledging the quiet part out loud, what we've been saying on this program for a long time, which is, of course, that, taxes at this point, in the way that the state is operating, taxes are an inevitability. And I want to get your take on the overall feel of the press conference and what you're seeing in the first few days of the session before we go any further on this.
Yeah, so I participated in a couple of legislative send-off events up in Fairbanks shortly before I came down here, and what I told everybody is, something happened last year that's the first time since the late 80s, since, well, Michael, you were in high school last, and that is the Democrats had control of both chambers of the legislature.
Right.
That hasn't happened since either 88 or 90, somewhere around there. So, and the inevitable result of that, and also add in the fact that we're on the last couple of years of a governor being term limited. And so it feels like kind of the mask came off in a lot of ways. And we started, the little rumblings that, I've been hearing for a couple of years already, behind closed doors, or, you kind of know what little pieces to watch for in people's comments. Now it's just being said outright. And you saw some of that last year. And then that press conference on Tuesday just solidified it all. It all came out. And it's like, oh, no, this is the direction that I thought we were going. And, I thought we've been headed this way for a couple of years now. And this just confirmed it. It's, they said, we're not cutting the budget except for the dividend. And so we need new revenue. And we believe that the economy that matters is the economy that the government creates. And a whole lot of pieces that like I said, we've known for a while, for those of us like you and me and others that have been tracking this for a while. Now it's just getting said explicitly finally. So it's
right.
In some ways for me it wasn't all that surprising. It was a little fun to watch you get all heated and everything yesterday going over it, but hey, it's good must-see TV, right?
Oh my God. I don't know if I can maintain that level of outrage for the next 5 months, man. Come on. I mean, that's exhausting. I went to bed last night and I just crashed out because I was just, but it's so frustrating. The worst part about this, Rob, is that, I've been talking about it, but you've been talking, a lot of us have been talking about this for years, that this was, I think I said it for the first time 6 or 7 years ago. It was probably the first time I ever said, if we don't get a handle on this, then taxes are inevitable. And then it became, forget about getting a handle on it. Taxes are inevitable, because I could just see that there was no political will. You said it. Lyman Hoffman, we just can't cut anymore. We just can't find ways to cut. We just can't find, we can't reduce the operating budget and still deliver to Alaskans the services at the level that they've become accustomed to. And I thought, well, that's the prime problem. You have created a situation where Alaskans have become very comfortable with this bloated level of services that they're getting. And quite honestly, I know people go, what do you mean? I'm not getting any services. Well, they're spending $18,000 to $20,000 for every man, woman, and child in this state. They're obviously creating something. I'm not getting that money level of services, but somebody is. So what's happening out there?
Right. And this goes to the other thing that I've been chatting about the last couple of days is this writing project that I've been working on here, where, I've been working with Suzanne Downing over at the Alaska Story, and what was it? Number 4 came out this last Tuesday. And I'm trying to publish one every Tuesday here. I've got about 10 of them kind of outlined. I'm still working on writing them all. But this very last one that I came out with was, if we spend so much money, why do we have such poor quality services? Because you say, oh, okay, we spend $22,000 a year per person in this state. What are we getting from it? And it's easy to say, well, services. Well, that's kind of an amorphous word, which I think is part of the point. We're going to keep it nice and vague. so that we can, so that we can redefine the term as necessary. But it's like, well, let's see, crime ain't that good. Our road maintenance ain't that good. Our schools ain't that good. There's so many other pieces. It's like, we got Medicaid and food stamps and childcare assistance and all this sort of stuff. And, the administration of all those things ain't that good. We're falling way behind on the paperwork side, things like that. And, we're looking at all of this and saying, well, what are we getting out of it? How is it that we're spending the most money per capita by far? Because, the most recent numbers I found were 2023, and we were number one at $22,000 a person, and number two was Delaware at $14,000. So we're way ahead compared to the rest of the country. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, well, why is it that our stuff is so poor in quality? Well, maybe because the service itself is not actually the point. Maybe it's because the point is the government spending money with politically favored groups in order to then get reelected. Right. I was looking over kind of a couple of comments online last night about, on a couple of my more recent writing pieces, and somebody made some comment about the politicians being bought and paid for. And I was thinking about that for a minute and was like, not necessarily, not in the way that you think. I don't really see anything like bribes or anything going on around here. I think in a lot of ways the voters are bought and paid for, and we get our votes bought for with state money, with the state budget. Right. You funded my thing, and so I'm going to vote to get you reelected. And, I think that's the piece that we need to look at here. A large part of what I'm trying to address in my writing project, and I've talked to Ben and a couple of other people about this is not an issue of, who's in office right now. We've changed out so many people in the legislature in the last decade, and yet we keep doing the same thing over and over again. We're replacing people with new people that then make the same decisions in a lot of ways.
Right. We've talked about that being, one of the charter of changes is change out the players. The problem is if you send exactly the same type of people back there, or people who can be swayed into that position, they immediately come in there unless they have serious convictions and principles. And they're going to do exactly the same thing with the guys that they replaced. And that's where we're at right now. And you've made some very interesting points in these articles, and what this article, the series of articles that Rob just mentioned, where he's working with Suzanne Downing over at the Alaska Story, these are a deep dive into kind of historically how Alaska was set up, where we came from, how it works on paper, then how it works in reality. And you've made some very serious observations and assertions and leaps in logic to look at this and say, and it's fascinating. Because I think that although they're saying the quiet part out loud now, they've been using not subterfuge, but things have been obfuscated in a big way over the last 2 decades, 3 decades in the state, where things are just kind of below the radar and you don't really notice it. And the average person who's not listening to my radio show, who's not following what's going on down in Juneau closely, like it's some kind of spectator sport, right? They just are not aware of it. And they're just kind of continuing on, fat, dumb, and happy, and then are shocked when something like this comes up, where all of a sudden there could be the potential for even more money to come out of their pocket. And we're going to talk about that here in a second, but we are up against the break. Robb Myers is our guest. We're going to continue with him here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll continue with Robb Myers in just a moment. Former Representative Ben Carpenter is going to be joining us in hour 2, so make sure you stick around for that. We'll be back right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. And Fat Ray makes an interesting point, which I'm going to spin off of here for just a second. He says, I respect Rob. However, I don't feel very bought off for my vote. My question to Fat Ray is, well, do you have any connection to government spending in your life? Do you have a business or a job that's connected to government spending? Do you have yourself or members of your family that are part of the social safety welfare net? Or do you have, see, that's the thing. Half of us are not going to feel very bought off because half of us don't really have any direct connection to that. But when you have, what did you say, Rob? 45% of people in the state, employees in the state, are connected to government in some way, either through direct or, contractual or whatever. And that doesn't even count the social safety net?
Correct. So our state's workforce is something along. So let's see, state population is about 740,000, give or take. State workforce is something like 325,000 ish, if I remember right. I'm estimating, and this is a back of the napkin math. Don't think that I'm within a half a percentage point or anything here, but. I'm estimating about 45% of our state's workforce depends on government spending, either directly or indirectly, for their paycheck because of either they're a government employee, federal, state, or local, or they're working in an industry that is heavily dependent on government spending. And the industries that I picked out of that were construction, education, healthcare, and the utilities. So for example, healthcare is the one that I found the most numbers on. We found a study done by UAA back in 2010 that already said 60% of the healthcare in the state is paid for by government money, whether that's federal, state, or local. And this is before Medicaid expansion. That was in 2015. So my estimate of the healthcare sector is around 80% is being paid for by government money.
Right.
So that's kind of the most obvious one. You've also got education. Education is outside of direct government employment, is actually a pretty small sector, but it's almost all funded by government. Then you've got construction. I know we've talked about that a few times, and utilities. Whether that's the telecoms or the electric utilities, things like that. We've talked about that before too.
Right. No, and I think that's one of the things that we don't think about is the knock-on effect. It's not just the direct employment. It's the people who are on the social safety net side from the services they receive. It's the industries that service those social safety net sides. Then it's the telecoms and utilities. I mean, millions and millions. GCI, just as an example, a standout example, has received hundreds of millions of dollars of state funds over the last couple decades. Hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's just one company in one industry, not to mention all the other knock-on telecoms things. And like you said, then the utilities and everything else. So all of these people, and when you think about it, 45% of the workforce, not including the social safety net people, it's a significant amount. Why would they vote themselves a lesser paycheck? Why would they want to vote themselves a potential reduction in their income? That's what
I think it was H.L. Mencken that said, it's hard to get a man to understand something when his paycheck depends on him not understanding it. And that's kind of the situation we're in here. It's like, we got to get people to understand that the problem is that we have concentrated too much spending into government and away from the private sector. But when that is where people's paychecks come from, how do you get them to vote against that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's again, Chris is talking about that Bastiat quote about when they figure out that they can plunder the public treasury through their vote. That's, what happens then? Well, it just gets plundered over and over and over again. And that's where we're at. And nobody's thinking about the long-term consequences of these actions. And that's really been part of the problem with the legislature for decades, is that there is no long-term thinking. It's always the next election cycle.
Yeah. So you mentioned Bastiat and, de Tocqueville and stuff. And it's like, okay, we've known this is a problem. This is a tendency for a long time. And we've set up a system in the state. We can talk about this more on the air.
Hold on.
Sure.
Sorry. Let's talk about it more on the air right now.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Robb Myers is our guest, Senator from the Interior. We're talking about, the state of government, what to expect this year and more. We were just getting down into some of the philosophical underpinnings of this and talking about, Bastiat, de Tocqueville, and a lot of these, H.L. Mencken, a lot of these philosophers who thought about this and talked about this for years. And one of the big things is, again, the kind of bastardization of the quote was, woe be unto the republic when they figure out that they can plunder the treasury or loot themselves the treasury through their vote. That's a huge problem. And that's essentially what's happening when you have 45% of the working force directly connected and dependent and reliant on that government spend. Why in the world would they ever vote themselves, vote in a way that would potentially deplete that or reduce that in any way, Rob?
Exactly. So if you go back to the de Tocqueville quote, the republic will survive until the public figures out that they can vote them largesse out of the public treasury. Okay, we've known this is a potential problem for a long time. People have been pointing this out for a couple of centuries, but here's what we've done in Alaska. This goes back to the 70s and the 80s. And this is why I say that, the issues that we're dealing with here are old and long-standing. They've just been covered up for a long time because of how much money we had coming off of oil. What we said is, okay, we're going to take the public treasury and we're going to fill it up with a whole ton of cash. And then we're going to be surprised when people decide to vote themselves largesse out of the public treasury. So the problem that we are running into in this state, this goes back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, and I detail this a lot in a lot of my articles, and I've got an upcoming one in a couple of weeks about it, is, we created this system in this state where the state owns the mineral royalties, and then it takes that money, primarily oil, and it distributes it out to the rest of the economy and, through the state budget, and it calls that the economy. Okay. And what that's meaning is that with all this money, if you and I had control of that money, we would make the best economic decisions that we could at the time. None of us are perfect, obviously, but around here, the incentives are different. We're not making the best economic decisions. We're making the best political decisions. We're taking that money and saying that is going to be part of how I get reelected, is I'm funneling money back to my district, either through a social service thing like Medicaid or something like that, or through the capital budget, or, pick a bunch of different ways in which our money comes back. Now, here's the thing. If you look at the history of Alaska, I've talked about this a couple of times before. Alaska started off as a Democrat state. And, we were dyed-in-the-wool Democrat back in the 50s when we wrote the Constitution. If I remember right, there were 5 women at the state constitution convention, but there were only 2 Republicans. So we actually had more women at the state constitution convention than we had Republicans. But we had a system that was set up under Democrats to take that oil money and then funnel it out through the state budget. Republicans didn't get control of the legislature until the early 90s. And what happened? We already had that system set up. We couldn't easily change that. And oh, by the way, that was about the time that, oil prices were seriously dipping. And so we kind of were kind of short-term focused, trying to figure out, how do we navigate the budget for these next couple of years. That lasted for a while. And so the end result of that is that even though we had Republican control of the legislature, we had a system that encouraged a more liberal, more progressive, more Democrat-oriented system where, if you're taking the largest industry and concentrating its money into government and then spending that out to, make so much of the economy, that's not exactly conducive to standard Republican principles of limited government, things like that.
Right.
So it's
Well, and before people get too up in arms about Rob saying, "Oh, Democrats bad, Republicans good," this may have been all set up under the Democrats. But the problem is that the Republicans that then took over, they went along to get along, right? They didn't try to do any radical changes. This is all part of what what we've talked about in the past. This oil, the resource curse, right? The oil curse
exactly.
from other countries that have built their whole systems on this. But, the Republicans have just as much blame in this as anybody else, because when they had the opportunity to change the system or fight back, instead, they went along to get along. They said, "Oh, well, okay, now we can fund our projects the same way the Democrats were," instead of doing the right thing. This is not a Republican or a Democrat problem. This is a short-term politician problem from day one.
Correct. This is a systemic problem. This is something that, like I said, it was set up in the 70s and 80s, and it just continued. And so, you've seen that kind of disconnect in the state, especially on the conservative Republican side of the state, where there's kind of a disconnect between the rank and file and the folks actually, in elected office or otherwise, in higher positions. And, for a long time, it looked like things were going good in the 90s and the 2000s because, well, we had enough money. We could keep going. We didn't have to increase taxes. We could keep the spending, kind of the same for a while. And it really didn't, I think people were largely happy because, things were mostly going okay. We had some problems in the late 90s there as the oil industry tanked, and we had some economic issues. But, we kept the system going because it was all kind of hidden, and, we didn't really need to change it because, the problems with it weren't cropping up for the average person. It wasn't until first we saw the budget go through the roof with all the oil money coming through from about 2006 to 2013 ish. And then on the crash on the other end of it. And that's when, especially when that crash hit, that's when we all start losing our minds going, holy cow, what's going on? And it's like, guys, we sowed the seeds for this decades ago. Right. We're just now seeing it. It's amazing how many problems you can have that you can paper over with money. We ran out of money. The problems reappeared.
Right. Well, and I think you're getting to the point that you've been hitting on recently, and I think pretty hard. And I think it's something that we've touched on over the years, and I've touched on over the years, but have never really exposed as the main problem here. And you're talking about it being hidden. I remember having a conversation with wasn't Jeff Cook, it was one of the cooks, and they well, you don't have to pay taxes in this state. You don't have to, you don't. And I thought, and at that point I said, but well, we just don't see it, and it's hidden. And I never explored that fully, but you've been coming back to that. And that's the thing. They want to keep it secret. They want to keep it hidden. They want to keep the cost of government below the radar. They don't want you to see it, because if you saw it, if you really felt it, then there would be a reaction. I mean, again, this goes back to my thought experiment of if you just gave all the resource revenue in the state directly to the citizens as owners and then taxed them on it, there would be a tax revolution the following day. Because if you got the $20,000 check and then 2 days later you got a bill from the state for $18,250, people would lose their minds, right? I mean, and that's the thing. You've been talking about that, where they want to keep the cost of government hidden and below the radar and obfuscated so that people don't really understand how it works. They don't understand that they are being taxed, in a stealthy way. They don't call it a tax or whatever, it's withholding. You don't see it. They take it before you get it. And so you never feel it. But that's the whole point of the way business has been done in this state for the last 40 years, is that the cost of government is essentially hidden from the pocketbooks of the general public. I mean, it's out there. You can see the checkbook. You can see the transparency. They talk about it in the bills and everything else. But people really aren't paying attention because it doesn't flow through them, as opposed to it in any other state in the nation.
Yeah, exactly. And as I mentioned a while back, and I mentioned one of my articles, I think I told you this, the amazing part to watch lately has been that as much as we have talked about how we need more revenue, the bills that are actually moving that talk about revenue, taxes, it's amazing how the ones that are actually getting traction, the ones that are actually moving, are ones that keep the cost hidden. So today, here in a couple hours, we've got a override vote scheduled for SB 113, which is, we called it the internet tax bill, basically, and it's changing how corporate income taxes are apportioned, to take account of internet sales and things like that. And that's going to bring in, well, the estimates I've seen are very kind of widely, anywhere between 25 million and 65 million. But it's like, they're promoting this on the floor saying, hey, Alaskans don't have to pay this tax. We're getting extra money. And it's like, well, no, corporate taxes are paid by people eventually.
I love that argument. This is a unicorn. Nobody will have to pay this. It will just magically appear. Don't worry. They won't increase anything on your end. It's all going to be great. Again, that obfuscation of don't worry, you still won't have to pay a tax to get all your government service, which is ridiculous. We are paying it.
Yeah, exactly. And I was, as we were talking here, I was just checking, every year for the last, 6, 8, 10 years, maybe a little longer, some Democrat has introduced an income tax. And, we as Republicans, we freak out when we hear income tax and stuff. It's interesting to me. This legislature, even though Democrats are in charge of both bodies, has not introduced an income tax. You know why? It's because they're worried that if they actually have to tax the people, that the people are going to push back on the spending. And that's their primary goal, is to keep the spending going. I was just talking to somebody last night, and I use this as an analogy. Okay. Think about a couple of people you may or may not know who've got a serious amount of cash. Okay. Let's say your doctor. Some doctors are paid better than others, but most of them are paid pretty well. And your neighbor down the street that just won the lottery. Okay. Think about the relationship you have with each of those people. Okay. You go to your doctor and, okay, he's got some money. I want something out of him. I want a service out of him, but I know that I'm going to have to give up something. I have to pay for it. Okay. And that creates a certain type of relationship. Now think about your neighbor down the street that won the lottery. Okay. I'm going to imagine he's got a lot of very new friends and probably some long lost relatives that came out of the woodwork recently, and they're all asking for something. And the only thing that he's asking for in return is to be liked, right? Because, and now think about politicians that have been given a pot of money. They don't have to get it from anybody directly. All they can hand it out, and all they ask for is to be liked, or in other words, reelected. Okay. That is what has happened to this state. Is we won the lottery back in the 70s when we discovered oil up in Prudhoe Bay. And now that the Prudhoe Bay oil is running out and the prices in production aren't what they once were. Now we're going after the permanent fund instead, because, now we can continue to fund things without asking people directly again, because we can get our money off of Wall Street. And all we're asking for is to be liked. We're just asking to be reelected. We're using our money to garner that likability, to garner that reelection. That's the place that we're in. That's the place we've been in for a long time. And, that's the system that we're trying to continue. We don't want people to not like us, which they might not if we actually ask them to pay for services. We might have them starting to think, hey, do I really need this service or not? But that's the problem that we're running into here.
Yeah, and I think, again, keeping it hidden from people over the course of decades has, of course, led to this point to where we become so tax averse in this state that any discussion of that forces the public to say, oh, we don't want to see it, right? They become so inured from it, from the cost of government, that any discussion on it immediately creates this visceral reaction of no, no, no. And so that's actually continued the problem and exacerbated the problem as we've gone forward, because we've become so used to receiving free services, quote unquote, that any discussion of, well, we really should, see where the costs are and have this paid for directly and everything else. No, they're immediate ramifications of not only no, but hell no, we shouldn't talk about it at all. And I think that's dangerous. Again, I'm not a fan of taxes, but like you said, when there's no reaction and there's no, somebody won the lottery and they don't feel like it's not an earned thing, then they're free and easy. That's why most people who win the lottery go broke, in a few short years, because they just don't have the fiscal discipline and everything else that went with it to understand where that came from. I want to talk a little bit about your series of articles. We just kind of previewed a little bit of it because you're going to get into that. I know your next article is going to talk about the history of the 70s and the 80s and how that came about, and then the failure on the part of the Republicans to actually fix it once they got into power. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. Robb Myers is our guest. The Michael Duke Show continues. We got more coming up. In hour 2, Ben Carpenter will be joining us. And we'll return in just a moment. We'll be back. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Robb Myers is our guest. We're going to be talking about his article series in just a moment. I'm sorry. I'm just looking through some of the comments here. Taking our dividends, everyone is affected, even people on disabilities, like stealing from the less fortunate, and the people that didn't need the dividends would donate to some amazing services for vulnerable people. It's a horrible thing to do. I mean, again, as Brad Keithley points out time and time again, it has the largest adverse impact on the economy when you take it from the dividend. And that's from people on the lower end of the income scale all the way up to the upper end. It has the largest single impact on the economy. And that is because, in part, it's the only real effect on that private economy, right, Rob? I mean, outside of all the government services and the public economy, that was the one thing that helped bolster up the private economy, was that infusion of cash out there, which is now dwindled away to almost nothing.
Well, it hurts the private. It's kind of a double whammy on the private economy. That's why it's the worst one compared to, say, a sales tax and income tax or other, different cuts that they looked at, cuts in the capital budget, cuts in the operating budget, stuff like that. It's a double whammy because it does two things for us. Number one, it affects people on the lower end of the income scale, and people on the lower end of the income scale spend more of their money as a percentage of their total. And so you're pulling money away from the people most likely to spend it, which then circulates it throughout the economy. The other thing that it does, and we didn't touch on this quite yet, is normally if you have a natural resource based economy like ours, let's say you're in Texas or Pennsylvania or something like that, or go to some places where, say, forestry is a big deal, and so that's private business that's doing the logging and stuff. That money stays with those private people. The royalties and stuff go out to private individuals, and that money then becomes the seed money for other businesses. Hey, I might own a piece of property that with a couple of oil wells on it, and I don't really care about the oil business. I contract that out, obviously, but I care about some other business that I'm interested in, and so I'm going to take that money and invest it over here in something else entirely. I think I've mentioned this one to you before. I found a study a few years ago that was looking at royalties from natural gas and comparing them to Pennsylvania to the UK. The UK is in a similar place we are, where the government owns all the subsurface rights, and Pennsylvania, it's mostly private ownership. And they said that when you had the private ownership, you got double the economic bang for your buck that you did when it was private, or when it was public ownership,
right?
Because you're removing that money from the ability to be invested into other places.
Right. Which, again, we've talked about the entrepreneurship, the actual creation of new jobs and long-term jobs outside of that. That's all super important stuff. We got about 2 minutes here, and Monty wanted to go in a different direction real quick, so we'll get your take. What is your take on apparently Scott Kawasaki is drafting a letter, have a colonel from Fort Wainwright go to Juneau, discuss the deployment of federal troops to Minneapolis and everything else. What's your thoughts on that? Is that something that you guys should be involved in, or is there a question of power there? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's one thing when it's National Guard troops. That issue came up here a couple of years ago because some of our National Guard troops were getting sent down to the southern border, and so we got kind of concerned about that. These aren't National Guard troops; these are federal troops. I mean, the guys on Wainwright and Eielson, that's who I talk to, obviously, because that's the interior. You can talk about Jay Bear and other places too, Fort Greeley, but they don't answer to us. They try to be, they're cordial with us. They recognize that, we have a say in things like quality of life for their soldiers and families and stuff like that. And so, we both have reasons to talk about that, various issues. But when it comes to deployment of troops, I mean, we've got zero say in that matter. These are federal troops under federal control. And I mean, it's nice to stay on top of things, but I mean, we have zero say in that. So
right. No, I mean, this is, again, it's deployment of federal already. I mean, these are national troops. These are not National Guard. I think Brian's right. It's a lot of virtue signaling coming from Kawasaki and company when they start talking about things like this. All right. Robb Myers is our guest. I'm going to drop a link into the chat room. This is his first, it's got a huge tag on it. Let me pull the tag off. This is his first article over at the Alaska Story, and you should go read it and then read the rest of the series of articles. And we're going to talk about that here in just a moment with Robb, the genesis of this and where it came from and where he's going. That is number 1 in the series. I just posted the link in the chat room, and you can go over there and you can find all of his stories. Although you should tell Suzanne, my pet peeve of the day, the formatting on the stories. There's no paragraph breaks. It just kills me. I'm trying to read it and there's no paragraph breaks. You should tell her, fix that. But there's it's great stuff. It's great stuff in there. Go check it out over at the Alaska Story. All right, we're going to continue here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
All right, we're continuing with Robb Myers, Senator from the Interior. We're talking about the upcoming session. And, I wish we had more time because I really would like to dive down into some of the big issues that are coming. That press conference, by the way, outlined some of the things that we're going to be seeing. The only bright spot in that whole press conference, I felt like, was the interchange between Senator Giesel and Senator Stedman, where Senator Stedman was very much on the overly defined benefits. He was very much pushing back on that. We could see already, even though we're facing this fiduciary crisis, that there is no lack of appetite to create more spending. But I don't have enough time to get into that today. We've got this one final segment here, and I do want to talk about, I know it was a tease, Robb. I do want to talk about your new series of articles over at the Alaska Story. You've been working with Suzanne Downing, and you've got a series of articles. You're up to number 4 or 5 now. 4.
Number 4 came out Tuesday.
Yeah, number 4 came out Tuesday. And so let's talk about the genesis of that and what you are going to be covering here in the near future. The genesis of it, why you've started to write these articles, and what you hope to accomplish with it. Right.
Okay. So we've been in this fiscal crisis, fiscal crunch, whatever you want to call it, for a decade now, right? I got elected in 2020, and so, I've kind of been involved in politics since, say late 2019 when I threw my name in the hat. One of the amazing things to me is that even though we've been in this situation for 10, 12 years now, and even though, largely the issues haven't changed, the players have changed, but the issues haven't, I get a lot of the same questions from the average person on the street. It's like, hey, why is it working this way? Why does this happen? And so I was just thinking about this a few months ago as I'm starting to think about coming back down here for the session again. And I'm like, if the same questions keep coming up, maybe we need to start talking about why those questions are coming up, and put some of these answers out here for people to start chewing on, and instead of having conversations onesies and twosies. I wanted to put stuff out there for the general public to look at. And so, the series of articles I've currently got outlines for about 10 of them. Like I said, number 4 just came out Tuesday, and the plan is they publish the Alaska story every Tuesday. So the very first question was, Alaska, why does Alaska look so good on paper, and yet we are in such horrible shape? Why do we perform so poorly? The next one was, why does Alaska hold all of the mineral rights? Why is it impossible to cut spending unless the state runs out of money? That was an interesting one. The one that just came out was, why do we spend so much money but have such poor quality services? Next week, gonna add to that one a little bit, but concentrate in a certain area. With all of this money that we've had available, oil money and now permanent fund money, things like that, why don't we build anything? Why is it that, I see guys, working on buildings or working on roads or something like that, and yet we never actually build anything that seems to really move the economy forward? Why is it that all of our construction is just us staying in place? What's the point of sitting on the stationary bike, so to speak? In a couple of weeks, it'll be, why do so many Republican legislators support higher spending? And we'll talk a little bit more about, the makeup of the legislature over the last 50 years and some things like that. And, some of the stuff we were talking about in the last segment about the structural makeup of all of this. So, I think
this is a great primer for going through why government in Alaska works the way it does. Right, you've got a very analytical mind, and you've got a lot of good insight, and you've done a lot of good research and historical. You got some good historical backing here, and these are short, concise articles that explain these simple problems. And I think they would make a good primer for anybody that wants to get a handle on what's going on in government. My question, though, is, Rob, although you've now outlined a goodly portion of some of the original problems, is, can we fix this? This is the question. I mean, and maybe that's a question of, can we fix it with the current makeup of the legislature, or is anybody going to see the light? If any of these new tax measures that are being talked about, either by the governor or by the legislature, if any of these come to light, will that fix any of these problems? I guess that's my question. I guess I'm wondering, am I whistling in the dark, as I've been for the last 25 years, complaining and talking about these same things over and over and over again? Or is there any potential light at the end of the tunnel?
There is a potential light at the end of the tunnel. And so part of what I'm trying to do with this is to talk about, why we're here, the incentives that our structure has created, why certain things that we talk about as solutions actually aren't solutions. I've seen a couple of comments in the chat room about, well, we just need to drill more oil. And I'm going to have one in a few weeks about why that is not a solution, why we can't just grow our way out of this. It's not going to happen. And so we can get out of this, but we have to recognize that this is not just some cosmetic thing where, just some little changes here and there around the edges are going to fix it, or voting in new people is going to fix it. It's long-term structural issues that we're dealing with. It's a question of incentives. We have set up a system where the people have an incentive to ask for more money from government. The politicians have an incentive to give it to them. The politicians have an incentive to ignore, or maybe in some cases even intentionally harm, the private economy. And until we start fixing those types of incentives, we're not going to go anywhere. Now, I'm interested to see what the governor puts out. We got the State of the State coming up tonight. I'm sure he's going to outline a lot of things there. I'm interested to dive into the bills once those get introduced. I'm assuming either Friday or Monday. We'll find out soon. And look at the details of it all. And, but again, this isn't just a question of, we need more money. This isn't just a question of we spend too much. This is a question of the incentives And our revenue streams, the types of revenue streams that we decided to create for our state 50-ish years ago, that set up a certain set of incentives. And if we want different revenue streams that change those incentives, then we've got the possibility of actually pulling out of this situation that we're in. And that's what I'm waiting to see. It's not just, oh, we need additional revenue, not, oh, well, we're gonna, manipulate the spending a little bit here around the edges. We got to have those deep structural changes that reconnect the people to the cost of government, that reconnect the government to the private economy, things like that. That is what it's going to take to get out of this. The question is,
right,
how much pushback are we going to get, because so many people are already invested in the current system?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, you talk about incentives. What's the incentive for the change? What's the incentive to change the current incentive system? I mean, right now, maybe it's because we're coming down to the final wire here of no more money or something else. But again, the desperation of doing everything from trying to combine the permanent funds, which is not about protecting the permanent funds, it's about protecting the spend or anything else. I mean, eventually all those bells and whistles will run out. I mean, is it going to take 2 minutes here? Is it going to take a full-on crash to get people to be incentivized to make changes, or do you think we can do it before we hit the bottom of the slope here?
Well, I think you had Donna Arduin on a few weeks ago, and you asked her more or less the same question. I think her answer was correct. You either have to have a crash where the current system flat out doesn't work anymore, or you have to have very strong leadership that can get into either the governor's office or a couple of leadership spots here in the legislature that is willing, that has a very strong vision and has the will and the smarts to figure out the strategy to turn that battleship. I'm not hopeful that we're going towards the latter right now, so I have a bad feeling not a lot's going to change until it's the former, which is the crash.
Yeah, and that's my fear at this point. Is it's like an addict. You can't get them to stop until they absolutely hit rock bottom and have lost everything, and have to build back from there. Anyway, Robb Myers, thank you so much for coming on board. Fastest hour in radio for sure. We're going to continue in hour 2 with Ben Carpenter. Robb, thanks so much for coming on board and joining us today.
Absolutely, Michael. Always good to talk to you, except at 6 a.m.
Except at 6 a.m. Yeah, sorry about that, my friend. All right, hold the line for just a second. Folks, we got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. I mean, again, going back, Rob, to what we were talking about earlier, the fact that it's hidden, the fact that they're incentivized to give the money, to hold the money, to keep the money. You saw Kathy Giesel's comment during the press conference about that's the only way we can keep these businesses running is with more government money instead of allowing the private sector to flourish and the free markets to flourish. It's just crazy. But you touched on something that I want to get a quick take on, because I have heard it from almost every candidate for office. Right? Legislators, gubernatorial things, gubernatorial critters. I mean, the whole thing. Oh, we need to focus on resource development. That's the solution to our fiscal crisis. Resource development. I mean, that's got so many problems. I mean, first of all, it's not fully in our control. A lot of times there's federal involvement and everything else for some of these major projects. The biggest problem, of course, is the timeline and the tail on this. Resource development takes, 5 to 10 years to really start to bear fruit. And we've got to make it through these next 10 years of fiscal crises and everything. What's your thought every time you hear somebody say something like the answer to our fiscal problems is resource development? And now that the president's in there, now we've got to strike while the iron's hot and yada, yada, yada. What's your thought on politicians who basically come up with that as their answer to the fiscal crisis?
When I hear that, I think two things. First of all, I think to myself, well, that's what got us in this mess. We decided to base our state government on resource money, and that's why we spend too much. And the other thing I think about is going on to, more along the lines of what you were just saying there. The oil brings in a lot of money for the state. And if you drill more oil, you get more money for the state, but not as much as we used to. Costs have gone up, prices have gone down, even though production is going up, revenue is going down coming from oil. And then you want to talk about other resources. Mining is great, brings in a lot of money for local government, but doesn't bring in a whole lot of money for the state. Fishing is crashing. We could do a lot more with timber, but that's going to stay relatively small. That's not a high volume or a high value industry. It could be better than it is, but it's not going to get anywhere close to matching oil. Pick your industry. It's just the amount of money involved there does not get anywhere close to solving our problem.
Right.
And in a lot of ways,
the problem is not only that, but even if there was more money coming in, government's propensity is to just spend it anyway, right?
Correct. And so again, the problem here is not volume of money. The problem here is incentives created by type of revenue stream. So if you don't change type of revenue stream, all you create is more spending. That's not going to get us out of this situation here. So,
yeah, no, it's amazing to look at, and especially the fact that nobody wants to talk about, you talk about production values going up, production going up by potentially 40%, but revenues dropping by 40%. That 80% gap, that delta V between the going up and the going down, nobody wants to talk about that. I just looked at Nat Herz's article where he surveyed all the gubernatorial candidates about whether or not they'd want to look at oil and gas taxes. And they were all like, no. There's like one guy that said, yeah, we should talk about it. But everybody's like, no. We're getting 40% more production and 40% less income. There's a problem there. Somebody needs to address that. We can't just blindly go, we support rah, when we're taking it in the short. Like as Brad Keithley said, we did a trade-off back when SB 21 came in. The trade-off was we would give up some of our money for more stability down the road. And now that the thing is swung in the other direction, everybody's like, don't touch it. Right. And that's been part of the problem with Alaska's oil tax regime for years, is it always swung in one direction or the other. We can't find the happy medium.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I know you got to go with Ben before we leave. I need to do something very important. Hi, kids. Nice to see you at home. I'll be home in a few weeks. So my wife put the show on YouTube on the TV at home. So
good. Well, hey, kids, thanks for letting us talk to your dad. But a few weeks, I think you might be a little optimistic. I'm just saying. I'm just throwing that out there. All right. Rob, thank you so much for coming on board. We appreciate it as always, even though it's early. Appreciate it.
All right. Good to talk to you, Michael. We'll catch you later.
All right. Thanks so much. Robb Myers, our guest here on the program. That brings us over to Ben Carpenter, who joins us this morning. Let's test his audio and video and see how we're doing today. See what's going on. Good morning, Ben. How are you doing, my friend?
Good morning, Michael.
You ready to dive into this?
I think so. How am I sounding?
You sound good. You're on. We got the right mic and everything else. You're looking good. You're sounding good. You're a little dark, but I don't know if that's just me or you or what. But I don't know if your key light in front of you is not on, but it's usable. Don't worry too much about it. Did you, just out of curiosity, Ben, did you get a chance to see my ranting yesterday with the whole?
I did, yeah, briefly.
Okay.
Parts
Good.
of it anyway.
Because I definitely would like to get your hot take on some of this stuff. So
yeah, the press conference is the only thing that's happened of note this week.
Well, and I want to talk about Oversight Live. Did you get a chance to do your own rant on this yet?
I'm having problems with the whole live connection thing. So
okay.
I'm waiting on others, the social media, the hosters, to figure things out.
Okay. Well, let me know if I can help you with that. I mean, I do it every morning. So let me know if I can help you with that, and we'll get on that, and we could talk about that off the air here or whatever, because I'm excited to see what you have to say. So we're going to I actually have some of these sound bites queued up, and you and I will go through this here and we'll get in onto it. I didn't have a chance yesterday. I was traveling yesterday. So I wanted to pick apart the rest of that press conference, that big 40-minute component in the middle, especially the interchange between Stedman and Giesel, but I didn't get to it. So, but we'll be able to recap some of the things that we talked about, and we'll get back to it. So I'm going to put you back in the green room. Hold the line for me, Ben. We'll be right back to you. Okay. You guys ready? Let's get this thing going on. The Michael Dukes Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Hour 2 is right now. We'll be back right after this.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That's just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends. Welcome to the fastest 2 hours in radio. We're into hour 2 today for this Thursday edition of the show. We just finished up with Robb Myers. And if you didn't get a chance to listen to it, it was a great discussion. And that's going on. You can find that on our podcast, which is available every day right after the show, wherever you find great podcasts, including my favorite Spotify. So go out there and take a look at it. Also, a quick reminder, if you want to help support the show and get some behind the scenes stuff, be part of the private Facebook group and everything else, you can go check us out at the Common Sense Core, which is over at patreon.com/Michael Dukes Show. Or you can go to michaeldukeshow.com and just click on Join the Core. I don't talk about that too much anymore, but there's a dedicated group of listeners out there who are all just, they love me. They love me. They really love me. And they're helping to support the show. And we really, we appreciate them as well. Hour 2 of the big radio program today, and we are jumping into it with my friend Ben Carpenter, who is a former representative and former host of the Must Read Alaska podcast, working on his new endeavor, which he's calling Oversight Live, which will be kind of a quasi-live react show to things that are happening in the legislature. Not just a react show, but kind of a play-by-play breakdown of everything that's happening there. And of course, he's got the history and the knowledge base, having worked behind the scenes, having worked in the legislature, to kind of give us some insight into that. We've asked him to come on again today. Last week we had a great 2-hour conversation with him, which was still too short. I don't know how that works, but we're gonna talk with him again here today, and we're gonna get his latest and greatest thoughts as we've started the session now. Ben Carpenter, our guest. Good morning, Ben.
Good morning, Michael. Good to be with you again.
Well, thanks for coming on board, my friend. This is, the only thing it seems like we can do about what's going on in the legislature right now is talk about it, right? And try and educate as many people as possible because, man, you tried to do it while you were in there. You did your best. You did your damnedest to try and fix the problems. And the entrenchment of the mentality that we have that's brought us to where we are today just seemed inexorable. I mean, everything you tried, every piece of common sense legislation and everything you brought forward, it just seems like, when the kitten doesn't want you to change the litter, that's all there is to it. You can't shovel it out anymore. And so give me
much of what I brought forward is being brought forward by the governor now.
I just thought that was funny. I was going to bring that up.
In a way.
Yeah, in a way, some of it
Who
in a
gets
way.
the last laugh, right?
Right, but let's you've had a chance. You said you watched my show yesterday where I got a little ranty. I'll be honest with you. I cannot keep up that level of outrage. I was so agitated yesterday. But give me your first thoughts, just kind of overall brief thoughts on this. We're going to get into some of the sound bites here and we'll talk about them more in detail. But give me your thoughts and overview of the press conference, the governor's press conference yesterday as well. And tell me what you're thinking overall about this session.
I think the entire thing could be summed up with the first statements that Senator Stevens made, welcoming everybody to the press conference. He said there's like a combined 90 years of experience from these House or Senate finance leaders, right? And I'm thinking, well, the present problem that we have is largely resulted of the decisions that we've made over the last collective 90 years. These guys are responsible for where we're at. And we're going to treat it like, oh, we've got some challenges ahead of us. No, like we're right where you put us.
Yeah. Oh, this is the perfect setup, Ben, for what this is from last May. Okay, they had a press conference. The Senate Finance had a press conference last May when they were talking about this, and this is Stevens going into Stedman talking about this back then. And I'll give you my thoughts on it, but I want to get your take on it. This is Stevens last May at their press conference talking about that.
So this is an amazingly difficult situation we are in, and we're asking pretty much impossible things of our finance committee. We know that we've got oil prices going down. It could be somewhere in the mid 60s, possibly, or more. We know that we have contracts that we knew were coming. They were coming. We didn't know how much it would be. Possibly within the $45 or more million range. We know that the federal government may be cutting. We understand they may be cutting up to 5%, maybe more. So there's just a lot of unknowns right now, Mark. I think we simply can't ask those questions at this time.
Well, the Senate President listed off a series of headwinds that we're facing. And I just don't want the public to dwell too much into that arena. We see them coming. We're going to try to deal with them.
We see them, I just don't want the public to dwell on this. I mean, we got all these, and of course, Stevens only listed like two things, right? I mean, the contracts and the oil prices. By the way, oil prices last week dropped down to $60 a barrel for ANS, for Alaska North Slope crude. He's talking about, we might be in the mid 60s. I mean, mid 60s is a great target. But then Stedman's like, well, I just don't want the public to dwell on that because, don't worry. We see it coming, and we got it handled. You are the guys that got us into this situation.
Imagine if we had some sort of a petrochemical industry in the state of Alaska, in South Central Alaska, or over in Valdez somewhere, and as the price of oil drops, that sector of our economy is doing better because the business inputs the cost is reduced. We don't have that, largely because of the cost of energy, the cost of electricity for our potential economy. That what doesn't exist that could exist if we had low cost energy. Same thing with the whole mineral conversation you were having with Senator Myers. We're looking at things as a resource extraction from a ownership state perspective, but we're not really considering what could be possible with value added activities. The legislature's not focused on that. Like these guys are not focused on that.
I thought the Power Cost Equalization Fund was supposed to be building out that infrastructure to create low energy costs. Oh, no. Now it's just going to be a stipend instead. We're going to pay the high energy costs and just pay for it instead of actually fixing the problem.
The whole point was if you can get the cost of energy to drop along the railboat, that means more money for Western Alaska. That's what that was. Just a subsidy for Western Alaska. And I get it. I understand. I mean, the challenge of energy distribution out in Western Alaska is a significant hurdle. Like even if you could put a power plant out there, there's too many villages to put power plants in each village, for example, right? So you've got a distribution problem of energy in Western Alaska. It's likely always going to be more expensive than it is on the railbelt.
Right. Well, it's amazing to see, but like I said, and like you said, ironically, he's talking about the 90 years of experience of the Senate Finance Committee that's sitting around him, which just goes to tell you that these are the people that have been in charge for the last 30 to 40 years, right? 20, 30, 40 years. All these members have been there. And, and we're going to get into this in a minute when we get into Lyman Hoffman's comments. But the fact that these are the guys that have been there the whole time making these decisions, and now suddenly they're going to see the light. They're going to wake up and make different decisions than where they got us to now. I mean, they saw this coming. They acknowledged it last year for the first time that the crisis was coming. You know, Lyman Hoffman talked about it, how he was shocked, I tell you, that we were $1 billion upside down. You have Stevens acknowledging that we've got challenges. You've got Stedman saying, yes, but we don't want you to dwell on it because we've got it handled. But do they? Do they really have it handled, Ben?
I don't think so. I think they just want to avoid accountability. I think that's what it is. They've been calling the shots. I mean, this is the whole reason why we no longer have a 16, 20. I mean, Senator Hoffman calls it a $20 billion CBR, but whatever that dollar figure is, it's multiples of $10 billion, right? And the reason that we no longer have that is because these folks decided not to address the deficit, the difference between the private economy's ability to bring in revenue to the state government and our propensity to spend. We didn't address it other than let's spend down our savings. These are the folks that made that decision year after year.
Yeah, and going back to the commentary that Rob was talking about last hour, you know, this whole thing may have been set up in the 70s and 80s by state Democrats, but then once the Republicans took over, there was still no accountability. I mean, the biggest years of spending were under Sean Parnell when he produced budgets that were in deficit by $3-4 billion. And as you said, instead of being the adults in the room and saying, we can't really do this, they just drew the money from savings. I mean, the Republicans squarely own the fact that they drained $15-16 billion out of the constitutional budget reserve. That's after the statutory budget reserve, by the way, because that was the first part of money that got drained. And I can't even remember how much was in there. I think it was $1 billion. But they just continued to spend it. And then they're shocked when there's no more money left. After they got done with the CBR, then what did they do? Well, then they tapped the dividend. But now they can see that there's very little left. I mean, there's $660 million left. If they paid us $1,000 dividend, that's all the money that's left. And we've got billion and even and we'll talk about this when we get back from the break. But even Hoffman said, if we paid $1,000 dividend, we have $170 million surplus, but that doesn't even cover some of these other costs, let alone the supplemental budget and everything else. I mean, this is a crisis, but nobody wants to say it's a crisis.
Yes. And I think largely it's a structural problem with the state of Alaska. And I know we got to go to a break here, but you've got a ownership state where there's a lack of incentive from private industry through land ownership. This is the incentive that exists in other states to develop resources. And so it takes deep pockets and a real willingness to have to mess with or deal with the state in order to do economic activity in the state of Alaska. And that's a structural, constitutional, state formation problem that we have. But there are ways to work around that. And it takes entrepreneurially minded people being in the legislature to think about where the source of prosperity is coming from in the state of Alaska. It's not from government. It's from private enterprise. It's from a private economy that's growing. We just have the wrong incentives in our state government.
Well, and I think we got about a minute here. I think that's one of the things that you've talked about, I've talked about, Rob's talked about, but I don't think people are getting the picture. We're the only state in the nation where the government is not funded from the people directly, right? It's all, again, behind the scenes. The money flows to the state first, and then we get the trickle down on the other side instead of every other state where the money is in the hands of the people. And then they're taxed. I know that's an ugly word. I know that. I mean, nobody knows that better than Ben Carpenter. I know that they get taxed, but they at least then have some skin in the game, and they at least had that money for a minute to be able to use it before they had to turn it over to the government. That is the major flaw in what we have right now.
Senator Giesel summed it up in this press conference as well. If you didn't catch it, she said that it was something funding government so the private sector can prosper. This is the legislatures, the leaders in our legislature. The thinking is that we need to have state spending, federal spending, in order for the state private economy to prosper. That is right. That is a fundamental philosophical position that you're in. Like you've got the cart before the horse in this respect.
And
it should be the economy.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that quote specifically when we return. We're going to continue in just a moment. Ben Carpenter is our guest. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back with more in just a moment. We'll return right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Ben Carpenter is our guest. Ben, I want to sidebar for a minute here since we're in the commercial break and talk for a minute. And we'll bring up Fat Ray's comment here because he says, no idea why Michael refuses to acknowledge this reality. We have blue states to look at to see how this plays out, talking about taxing the people to then pay for government. It plays out the same every time. The big spend stays, the producers leave. But I think because we have no connectivity between these two things, that there would be some changes in the state of Alaska because it didn't start slowly and build up. This would be an abrupt change if we had to start taxing people in the state. Now, Ben, you suffered the consequences of your discussion on taxes. And how do you feel about that argument? The idea that taxation doesn't work, that a straight taxation to the people wouldn't work because, hey, look at California and everything else.
I suffered because people couldn't see past the word tax. Remember, I'm not promoting a tax. I'm promoting a fiscal plan that reforms and reorders the way we do tax and spending in the state of Alaska. Governor Dunleavy's proposed reducing the corporate income tax. Why would you do that? There's a lot of people that are saying, why would you reduce the corporate income tax and put a sales tax on the people? Okay, well then you're not thinking about this from an economic point of view. You want economic activity, you want to grow the economy, but you've got one of the largest corporate income tax rates in the nation. Companies don't want to come in if they're going to have to be subject to the highest corporate income tax. So you want to put the incentives in place for corporations to want to come do business in the state of Alaska. Conversely, on the other side of the coin is you want people to be questioning their government as to what their spending levels are. Meaning, I'm not going to pay for things that I don't want the government to grow and do things that I'm not willing to pay for. Right now, we're asking for government to grow and force everybody else to pay for it, which means we have a government that is larger per capita than every other state. Well, we have the wrong incentives in place.
I think your key component there you were talking about is a reorganization of the structure. Because here's the thing, to Fat Ray or anybody else who says that, we are already paying these costs. We just don't see them because the money never hits our account first.
That's exactly right.
If you were paying
right, if the permanent fund earnings were being delivered to the people per the statute, and you were paying a statewide sales tax, a low broad-based sales tax, you would currently have more money in your pocket than you do now.
Right. And that's my point. If you're already paying it, wouldn't you rather have some of the money in your hands to begin with, even if you still had to pay the same amount? Wouldn't you rather have that money come to you first so you could use it and invest it and make more money back off of it before you got? I mean, wouldn't put some of the control back into people? And wouldn't that wake some, not all, but wouldn't it wake some people up to what's going on?
And the business owner says, heck yeah, I want that transaction. I want people to come spend that money in my business before a portion of that transaction goes to the state in the form of a tax. It's a model of movement of money. Right. The government, the investment earnings that are the people's money gets handed out to the people. The people spend it in the economy, and the economy funds the government. Right. That is broken in our state.
Well, we know already. I mean, Donna and I have had this discussion many times, but we've had this. We know that money in the private sector moves and multiplies, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. It turns that many times in the economy. $1 generates $6, $7, $8 of economic growth. And yet when it comes from the government, it's less than $1 produces less than $1. And that's the whole point. We're already paying it, Fat Ray. We're already paying those things. We're just not seeing the money in our hands first. And so wouldn't you rather have it be in the hands of people first, even if it does then has to get taken by government? That's my point on this whole thing. We're 30 seconds out. Ben Carpenter is our guest, and we're going to continue here. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Please like and share, subscribe, ring the bell, get more people involved. Check out the Common Sense Corps if you want it. We would love to see that. We got to go. We're going to jump back into it. Please, also, Ben, do you have your YouTube channel up yet?
The YouTube channel is created for Oversight Live. It just is not allowing me to do a live broadcast yet.
Okay. All right. We'll work on that here in a minute. The Michael Duke Show.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
All right, we're continuing now. Ben Carpenter, our guest, former representative, and now the host of a new program on YouTube, which is getting up and running hopefully this week, called Oversight Live, where he does it's a quasi-live react to and play-by-play on what's happening in the legislature, and it should be super educational. I love Ben's insights on what's going on out there. I want to touch back on this press conference again, because you made mention of it right before we went to break, Senator Giesel's comments during this thing. And again, I kind of titled this whole press conference was kind of an episode of, now they're saying the quiet part out loud, right, Ben? I mean, that's kind of, now they're saying the things that they're putting out in the public, the things that they wanted to say. This is Kathy Giesel, and on that press conference, specifically outing her philosophy on what she thinks the economy should be about.
Mr. President, this is a really serious issue. There are businesses that are going to close if the next construction year is not funded. And so I'm pretty concerned about it. You know, we talk about funding government to the level that citizens expect. This is funding government so that the private sector can prosper, so the private sector can do the work that we needed to do. DOT doesn't actually build the roads. They contract with contractors. And those are the people that are standing by, waiting to do the work, but had very minimal work this last year. And if they don't have this money for next year, or this coming year, summer of 26, there'll be businesses closing. So this is a top issue.
So this is such a bass-backwards kind of understanding of how the free market works, but it is the philosophy of many in the legislature. She said it. We've got to fund the government so the economy, so the private economy can grow. That's not how the free market is supposed to work. And again, as we can see, because we're now reaping the rewards of this philosophy, this is the philosophy of many out there, Ben.
This is exactly it hits the nail on the head of the problem with regard to decision makers in the legislature. So many people for many decades have been tied to state spending in their own private interests. And that is what the legislature has come to believe is what you do with money and that's how you grow your economy, is more state spending in capital projects and that type of thing. It's a self-licking ice cream cone. I mean, I don't want to cast aspersions, because this is just the way it has been. Former Speaker Mike Chenault had a horizontal construction company. Former Representative Gary Knopp from the Kenai had a horizontal construction company, right? How many current and past legislators have had financial ties to either in the private sector or the public sector to state spending? This is how and why things are being decided the way they do in our state government, because there aren't enough people representing private industry and private sector economic growth, where government stays out of the way and isn't necessary. Like, the spending is not necessary for my business model.
Right.
For exportation of peonies, people have asked me, well, did you participate in the shipping reimbursement that the federal government, the USDA, provides? I'm like, no. I have never considered including that in my business model. I don't want to be successful based on the fact that I'm getting subsidy. And if the subsidy goes away, then I'm no longer profitable. I don't want to depend on that. It doesn't make me more resilient because I've got somebody else paying my bills. I want to find a way to do it on my own and have the private economy sustain my business model.
You bring up a point that I find ironic. I mean, Kathy Giesel in her own newsletter to her own constituents was calling out the new representative Garrett Nelson, how he had a conflict of interest because he was going to be voting on a PFD and he's got 9 kids. And here she talks about how the government has to spend for construction, never mentioning the fact that her husband works for DOT. Is there a conflict of interest there? You just talked about Chenault. You talked about, I mean, how many of these guys, even Mayor Machicki, commercial fishermen, voting on rules for commercial fishermen. I mean, this whole thing about conflict of interest and everything else. How many industries now are linked to government? How many industries are dependent on that government largesse? I mean, we talk about telecoms. Medical is the huge one now. Medical is the healthcare system fully dependent on state spending in many ways. They don't want to see any of those cuts, but it's industry after industry that's become dependent on government. How are we ever going to cut this through?
It has to start with education of the populace. And a reason why I'm going to this Oversight Live is because I believe that Alaskans and Americans in general are not doing a very good job of oversight of their government. We are trusting that our elected representatives are doing the right thing, and we're not providing enough oversight. In Alaska, we're challenged because we don't have a road to Juneau, and it's expensive, prohibitively expensive for most people to go and engage and personally witness what's happening. But we do have video. Things are broadcast, but do you really understand what's happening, right? So this is the concept and the reason why I think it's necessary to put Oversight Live together, is that I will participate with you in watching what is happening and help explain what is happening from a private sector perspective. You're not going to get that in any press conference or any explanation that's coming from any of the legislators most of the legislators that are sitting, and all of the ones that are in power right now. You're not going to get that. They're going to look and explain things through the lens of somebody who is benefiting from state government spending. That is the purpose and the focus of the legislature. It is not on ensuring that we have a good economy. And this is where states and countries fail. If you can't feed yourself and you can't grow an economy that sustains your demands for public services, you end up failing in the long run. The economy has to be the foundation of your business model or your state funding model for state government. It has to be.
Right.
And we are missing that boat in the state of Alaska.
No, the governance model has to be set up on the private economy, because that's the only way that it can react to real-time market forces and to what's happening in the economy as a whole. And we've been so divorced from it for the last 40 years that there just, at this point, there is no connectivity other than now it's the reverse connectivity that Giesel was just talking about, of making sure we spend government resources so that certain private entities are taken care of.
It's
right.
Be
That's
one of
the thing. Certain private entities that yeah.
It's got to be one of the dumbest things I've ever heard a legislator say with regard to the private economy.
Yeah. But it shows the mentality, right? I mean, that's the thing. It shows the mentality of
adequately. That's absolutely right.
Yeah. Lyman Hoffman got into this too, and I don't want to play the whole thing because it's about 3.5 minutes, but there were a couple. I
anticipate there's going to be a lot of discussion this year on what the dividend should be, but I would assume from last year's discussion, if we adopted a $1,000 dividend with the governor's proposed budget, that would give us a surplus of about $150 million.
There's some comments in here, and I'm sorry I just kind of broke into that, but there's some comments in here. He goes on to talk about how, we had $20 billion in the CBR, but that's just gone by the wayside. And again, going back to your original comments of Senator Stevens saying we've got 90 years of experience here on this dais, Lyman Hoffman and company were there. It didn't just go by the wayside. These people spent it, right? They didn't stop and say, whoa, you're asking us to spend more than we take in yet again for the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth year. They didn't say, whoa, we can't keep doing this. It didn't just go by the wayside, Ben. They spent it.
That's exactly right. If we paid a full dividend, we'd have a $1.5 billion deficit. That's his point. But it's also accurate to say if we paid a full dividend, we would have to pay for 90 years of collective decisions some other way. That's also accurate. He's framing this conversation about the dividend as just another spending decision for the state of Alaska. And it's the boogeyman. The dividend payment is the boogeyman. It's standing in the way of a balanced budget.
Right.
Other government spending decisions are held harmless while the PFD program gets the blame. That's the program we can't afford.
Right.
He's pointing to $1,000 PFD this year, and then he and Stedman and Giesel add on, oh, well, we may not even be able to afford $1,000 because look at all this state spending. This is why the dividend's going away, because nobody cares that $1,000 or $3,000 that comes to every Alaskan would get spent in the private economy. That ma and pa businesses,
right,
people who sell snow machines, people that sell generators, people that sell kitchens, right, or bathroom remodels,
heating
whatever
oil,
it is that
fire.
you're going to go spend $3,000 on, even if it's a plane ticket to Hawaii. The private industry and the employees that are employed in the private industry are benefiting from that $1.5 billion or whatever that number is of being spent in the private economy. And these people are saying that doesn't matter nearly as much as spending that $1 billion on government employees, government programs. It is bass backwards for the way that government should be looking at private economy and the distribution or the flow of money.
The worst part of that argument, again, that we can't even afford, again, making the PFD the boogeyman, is twofold. But I guess let's focus on that first. It's the worst part of this is that the PFD is paid for. It's fully funded. The PFD itself, the money is there. It's not like they have to go raise revenue for it because the money is in the earnings reserve account. What they do is they make the PFD the boogeyman, and then they take the money from the PFD to spend on other things because they don't want to have discussions on how to fund these other things. That's the worst part. It's not like, and it goes back to that dichotomous argument about, well, do you want taxes or do you want a PFD? The PFD is already funded and paid for. You should be asking, do you want to have to tax yourself for all these ancillary programs that are out there? That's the question.
Yeah, Hoffman tries to make the case that they have been unable to reduce the operating budget. That's a half truth and a lie in my book.
Oh, I think
it isn't a case in 6 years. It isn't a case where I have had conversations behind closed doors with senators and they're saying, hey, we really need to find a way to reduce the cost of government. That never happens. That conversation never happens. So to say that we've been unable, that's just, don't hold me accountable. We can't do anything with state government, the size and cost of state government. We can't do anything with that. It just is the way that it is, and we just can't do anything about it.
You're being way too kind, Ben, in my opinion, because they could not even, when it was brought to their attention that they had all these empty positions that hadn't been filled in years, and they were going to save a few $100,000 or a few $1 million by emptying out those positions, they couldn't do that. When Will Stapp brought up the one program that's been in existence for 5 or 6 years, but has served 0 Alaskans and is still costing $50,000 or $60,000 a year to administer, even though it has served no one, they couldn't remove that. It's not that they can't; it's that there is no willingness to do that.
Yeah, it is competition. It is competition being demonstrated within the legislature. It is competition between spending permanent fund earnings on government employees and government programs versus spending permanent fund earnings on private industry and private jobs. That is 100% the competition that's happening right now. And those that are promoting money being spent on state government and state government employees are winning this conversation. It is more important to the decision makers that those people have jobs and those people have paychecks than it is for private industry, because there is a complete disconnect in the thinking of legislators and the structures that we have, that private industry even cares outside of the oil industry, that it even matters to state government. It doesn't. The price of oil goes down, state government cares. Price of oil goes up, we spend more. If your economy where you have a job in the state of Alaska goes up, the state doesn't spend more. They don't have more revenue off of that. They don't care. You lose your job, they don't care. It's actually one less mouth to feed at the school lunch table if you've got kids. Right. It's actually a benefit if you go away.
Right. And that's the worst part. We're going to rapidly reach that point to where that it's going to become important that more people leave the state, because then they would have less mouths to feed, less people to service, and they'd have more money for government. That's the thing. When we reach that point, that tipping point, that's when it's going to accelerate rapidly to the end, because then, hey, we've got more money to spend on these services for less people, and we can do more. Well, what we want. And again, with nobody feeding the trough, it's going to empty out pretty quick.
Our fiscal structures are incentivizing the opposite of what we want. That is what we have in this state. We are incentivizing government growth, especially when we're looking at permanent fund earnings, and all of the earnings will eventually be spent on state government. We're incentivizing that government will care about growing investment earnings, but it won't care about growing the economy and jobs in Alaska. It won't matter to the decisions that are made for the state budget.
Yeah. Ben Carpenter is our guest. We're up against the break, so we're going to continue here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Dukes Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We will be back with more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes,
allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Ben Carpenter is our guest. Ben, I was trying to, while we were talking there, I was trying to pull you up. What's the channel name on YouTube for Oversight Live?
Oversight Live.
It's just youtube.com/Oversight Live. Because I couldn't find it, Oversight Live. I couldn't find it on the page isn't available. Okay. So you'll have to...
I can show you a screenshot. I know that it exists. So I'm having some technical difficulties here.
Yeah, send me a link. Send me a link to the go to your channel page, not the studio, but to the channel page itself, and you can drop a link in the chat room here for folks to find it and see it and subscribe to it. So when we get it all squared away, they can immediately get notified on that. Just go to the main channel page and copy the link at the top, and we'll get things squared away from you. Because I did the search, I couldn't find it through search, so we'll get it there, and then we'll get you squared away on the live broadcast thing. It's there's challenges. I've been doing this for a few years now, so I've already worked through most of those.
I might have figured it out just as the light dawns on here. So here's the link for everyone. There is a stinking @sign before Oversight Live, and that might be what the problem is.
Really?
I don't know how that happened.
YouTube.com/@Oversight Live. See if
which is not intuitive. Like, who would think to put an @sign before Oversight Live?
Yeah. Oh, there it is. More about this channel. OversightLive.com. Okay.
I'm all about transparency. That's what we got to get to, a more transparent government. So here's sausage making on how to get a podcast up and running.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes when you're making this stuff happen. Okay, I have subscribed to the channel there. So we'll see if we can help you get squared away. No, this is your own thing, right, Ben? You're not associated with Must Read anymore or anything else. This is your own deal.
This is my own deal.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, I was just looking at Randy. I love you so much, man. I really do. I'm gonna let Ben handle this one. Randy says, if the PFD is fully funded, then every other single item is fully funded. But all the items that the state wants to spend needs to fit within a balanced budget. I don't even know how to unpack that. There's so much wrong with that. Ben, your comment on that.
The statute, and I know that the courts hate this and the legislature doesn't want to accept it. The statute, if we're a nation of laws, a state of laws, the statute spells out where the permanent fund dividend gets its money and how much it is. The statute does that. Now, the argument is, well, the legislature gets to make a decision because the Constitution says that there's, you got a prohibition against the dedication of funds. I get it. I understand that the legislature needs to make a decision from one year to the next, right? Subject to appropriation. But the statute is spelling out where that money is coming from, and the legislature can make a decision to either do that or not do that. Every year they have to. But to say that it's just subject to appropriation and that there's no plan for it, that plan is what the statute is. So you can put the statute in place. I mean, they do this with PCE. It's a statutory program, and we point to it and say, sacrosanct. We cannot change or go off of the formula for PCE. Let's take BSA. That's a formula. It's a statute that's saying how we're supposed to spend money. No one's claiming that the legislature shouldn't or can do something different than what the BSA, the base student allocation, says, right? The legislature is choosing to follow one statute on how you're supposed to spend money for consistency, and it's choosing to ignore the other. So the whole point of this is that the legislature is prioritizing itself and government, the sustenance of government over the sustenance of a private economy. And the reason that it's doing that is because the private economy is disconnected and it doesn't matter to state spending. It is mattering less and less to state spending. And that's what the permanent fund earnings equals into the future. Somebody says, oh, let's get the permanent fund to $100 billion. That gives us $5 billion, a 5% market value draw gives us $5 billion to spend on state government. We won't need other sources of revenue. We will not need other private sector sources of revenue for state government. It will continue to grow at the size of the permanent fund. So you think you're a limited government guy? You're not going to have limited government when you don't have a say in the cost of the government.
Clang, clang, clang. That was the warning bell for those guys when it happened. Ben, I want you to look at this real quick. The committee intends for the payment of dividends to have first call on 50% of the income of the permanent fund available for distribution. I mean, this is a shall. This is what it's about. This is the intent language when they created the permanent fund. I want your commentary on this when we get back here. We're about 5 seconds out, so we're going to jump back into it. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, final segment here. Ben Carpenter, our guest. Getting a little heated during the break. But it's it's just kind of what it is. This floated around. I picked this up here recently. This is from the House Finance Committee, May 14th, 1982. The framers and founders of both the permanent fund and the dividend were talking, and this is actual notes from the committee, House Finance Committee, May the 14th, 1982. And here's what it says. Let me pull this so that everybody can see this here. The committee intends that the payment of dividends shall have first call on 50% of the income of the permanent fund available for distribution. That means from the earnings reserve, regardless of what other uses the income is put to. Regardless of what other uses the first 50% of the income should be available for permanent fund distribution. Economists appearing before the legislature have predicted an economic slowdown in Alaska, resulting from a decline in state spending and lending caused by recent drops in world oil prices. Economists appearing before the legislature and other public forums in Alaska have argued that direct distribution of a portion of the state revenues to all Alaskans, such as embodied in the permanent fund dividend program, is the most efficient method of increasing Alaskans' income. The committee recognizes that virtually all the petroleum development in Alaska has occurred on publicly owned lands. This is a sharp contrast to other states where vast accumulations of wealth have accrued to private landholders. So they know. And they said that going back to quote ICER, the direct economic impact of eliminating the purpose fund had the largest adverse impact on the economy. They talked about this in 1982. Ben, your thoughts?
Well, very clearly, there was intention at the state level in the legislature, and this is one chair, a single chair of House Finance. Let that sink in. One dude making some decisions here for priorities of the Finance Committee, and there's a recognition from economists, and I know that Milton Friedman was asked about this. What is the best use of the permanent fund earnings? And he said, put it into an airplane and get those dollars, dump them out the windows and get them into the hands of the Alaskans as soon as possible. Get that money, 50% of those earnings spent in the private economy. That used to be a priority for our House Finance people. It used to be, because there's a recognition that we want to have a growing economy. Fast forward to today, and that's gone away. It is no longer a pressure in the House Finance Committee or the Senate Finance Committee. Spending permanent fund earnings in the private sector is valued, especially when compared to sustaining state spending or other alternatives for sustaining state spending. And this is why I have said, you're going to get taxes. They're going to tax you because government is always going to try to tax you. That is the battle that happens in every other state in the nation and every other jurisdiction around. Talking other countries, there's always a battle about taxation, except in the state of Alaska. They're just taking the money that should be going into the private sector from your interest in our ownership state. That's what's happening. It is a tax without calling it a tax. It is. I don't have to get unelected because I instituted a tax.
Right.
It
It's
is
still
insidious.
Yeah.
What they're doing.
And this is what Rob was talking about, is that they're hiding the cost of government. That they continue to do it and do everything that they can to obfuscate and hide the cost of government, because if people really realized and that money was directly distributed to them, and then they had to pay a tax bill for the $18,000 to $20,000 per person that the state's spending, there would be a revolution in this state the next day. But they don't do that because they hide it. You never see it. The money's taken from you and you don't feel it. Up front, you feel it in the, down the road because of the repercussions in the economy, but you don't feel that pain up front. And so you're okay. It's like we're hostages, right? We're hostages in this whole situation. We don't even know we're being held hostage.
Yeah. If you take a step back to a 30 or 40,000 foot level, your greatest risk and the pain that you're going to feel later in life and the life that you're going to hand down to your kids is not because of the level of taxation. It's the size of government. Spending is taxation on somebody. If we allow our state government to become completely funded by the permanent fund earnings, it will continue to grow and impact your life. So if that's what you want, Alaskans, is to have a self-funded socialist government where the government, the people in the legislature only care about what the government can do for people, If that's what you want, then continue to avoid the tax conversation that ties your private economy and your decision-making power over money to the legislature. Avoid that conversation. And that's what you're going to end up with, is a socialist government that is funded out of permanent fund earnings, and it will continue to grow. And that growth of government is in the long run going to be more damaging, detrimental to your future prosperity and your kids' prosperity than paying a tax is.
Right.
You're going to end up with taxes in the future anyway. The government is not going to allow us to not have, somebody is going to pay for their growth.
Look at the discussions today. We're already talking about it. I've said it for years. You're going to have no dividend and a tax. It's already there. It's coming. We're down to the last 4 minutes here, Ben. Oversight Live. I know you've been having some technical challenges to get things rolling, but give me the synopsis of what Oversight Live is about, and how folks can participate in that.
Yeah, so I have a particular perspective. The news media has a particular perspective. I'm going to give you mine. I'm going to invite you to join and watch the truth as it's happening. It's not what some news media person put down in writing. Like it's the truth as it's happening. And I'm going to try to highlight the important parts and funnel out the filter out the unimportant parts, so that you can see these statements that are coming from people that we've elected, so that there is oversight, proper oversight of our government. And you're going to be faced with a decision at night. Sit down and watch some stupid show on TV, or sit down and participate in your elected process and in your civic duty to provide oversight over your government. And I think that this is bigger. It has to be bigger if we're going to win this fight with our state, local, federal government. We have to be better at providing oversight. And that means we need to understand. So you have questions about what's happening in committee, you'll be able to chat. Hey, Ben, what is going on here? Why are they saying this? What are the alternatives to what they're presenting? Right.
Right.
For example, there's a state affairs committee that just met, and they poo-pooed the governor for not showing up on the first day with a bill hearing. And then they talked about a subject and invited a guest. Okay. That's the chair's responsibility to figure out what guest he wants to invite in order to sell his topic. It isn't necessarily the truth. It's just what they want to sell.
Right.
The narrative that gets written about in the press is, well, the truth is presented, because that's what you do in government. You present the truth.
Right. Ben Carpenter, his new YouTube channel is youtube.com/@Oversight Live, ampersand, the @ symbol, @Oversight Live, youtube.com/@Oversight Live. We're going to try and get him up and running today and see if we can get something, because we got a big show tonight, the governor's State of the State, that we're going to see what's going to happen. Ben, thanks so much for coming on board. As always, it's great to talk with you.
Good to talk with you, Michael. It was fun as always.
All right, hold the line for a second. Folks, we're out of time. We got to go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Tomorrow, Firearms Friday, Dr. John Lott, our guest. We'll be back tomorrow. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. All right, Ben, any final thoughts here before I let you go?
Well, I just want people to be clear that I do understand that you've got to be able to make your point with words, and elevating your volume isn't an adequate alternative to picking the right words. I get super excited about these topics, and it is passion. It's not anger, it's passion. I guess maybe in some cases when you hear stupid comments from people like Senator Giesel, there is a little bit of righteous anger because she should know better. But
right.
I just get passionate about this because it's clear to me. I've put my time and energy towards focusing on the fiscal problem of the state. And I feel sometimes like others don't care as much as I do. And that's where this passion is coming from. I really want people to understand what is actually happening at the state government and why it's happening. Get to the root of the problem. And we can't avoid that conversation within our own lives. We are part of the problem. Alaskans and what we're demanding of our government is part of the problem.
I think that the actions of the legislature this session will probably drive more people to start to pay attention to what's going on. And they're going to be looking for answers because they haven't been involved at all. If they start to understand that they're going to have to start paying taxes on top of everything else in addition to losing their dividend, I think we'll see a groundswell of people who will start to pay attention a little bit more, and they need a place to go to help them understand. So that's why I'm excited about you putting this together as well. Ben, thank you for all you do. I appreciate it. I'm going to put you back in the green room for a minute, Ben. We'll talk as soon as the broadcast is over here. See if I can help you with some of this stuff. Ben Carpenter, our guest, The Michael Duke Show. Folks, we appreciate you guys coming out and joining us. We will see you guys tomorrow with Dr. Lott. That's going to be a fun. It's going to be a fun time. So stick with us and enjoy. Be kind, love one another, live well. What was I forgot. I might as well. Again, if you want to help support the show, the Common Sense Corps is where you can go to do it. For as little as $3 a month, you can help support the show and keep us going. It's only $3, but it gets you access to the private Facebook group and more. Check it out. Patreon.com/Michael Duke Show or MichaelDukeShow.com and just click on Join the Corps, the Common Sense Corps. All right, my friends, we got to go. We will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.